The wind howled through the twisted spires of Aurealis, carrying whispers of mechanical hymns and organic lamentations. Suspended above the churning waters of what was once the Pacific Ocean, the floating city gleamed with bioluminescent veins that pulsed beneath translucent walkways. It was the year 2225, nearly a century after the Great Collapse had reshaped continents and consciousness alike. Amara slipped through the crowded market district, keeping her head low and her hands tucked into the pockets of her weathered jacket. The hood shadowed her face, concealing the emerald flecks that sometimes sparked in her irises, telltale signs of what the elders called the blood mark. Around her, vendors hawked salvaged technology alongside vials of sanctified moss and crystallized memories. The boundaries between science and spirituality long since dissolved. "You're late," Jax muttered as she slid into the narrow alcove where he'd been waiting. His fingers, calloused from years of mechanical engineering, continued to adjust the miniature reactor embedded in his forearm. "Council's been asking questions about last night's power fluctuation." Amara sighed, pushing back her hood just enough to meet his gaze. "It wasn't me this time. I was at the sanctuary with Celine. That's what worries me." Jax's eyes narrowed, the implants at his temples glowing faintly orange with concern. "The closer you two get to deciphering those scrolls, the more incidents we're seeing." The incidents, as Jax euphemistically called them, had become more frequent. Plants withering at Amara's touch one moment, then growing exponentially the next, electronics shorting out when her emotions spiked. The whispers that followed her had grown from childhood taunts to adult suspicions. Bad luck. That's what they called her. The girl whose mother died giving birth to her during a rare alignment of the artificial moons. The child who survived when her entire nursery cohort succumbed to the root fever. The teenager who could hear the sentient plants murmuring death omens before disaster struck. Celine believes we're close to understanding the true nature of my connection. Amara hesitated to call it power. Power implied control, and control was the one thing she lacked. Jax snorted. "Celine believes in communing with plant spirits while drinking fermented nectar. Not exactly a scientific approach. And your precious machines have explained what's happening to me," Amara challenged, a spark of green momentarily illuminating her eyes. A nearby hydroponic vine curled inward, browning at the edges. Jax raised his hands in surrender. "Fair point. I just worry. Nova Synthesis has been sniffing around the lower levels, collecting samples from the sentient flora that's breached the city's understructure. They're particularly interested in the specimens that die in your presence." Amara's heart sank. Nova Synthesis, the corporation that had transformed survival technology into profit engines, that had commercialized bioluminescence and weaponized photosynthesis. Their gleaming tower dominated the western sector of Aurealis, housing laboratories where rumors claimed humans and plants were fused into living weapons. "The seasonal transition festival is tomorrow," she reminded him. "Celine says the veil between life forces will be thinnest then. If we're going to understand this curse, that's our chance." Jax sighed, finally looking up from his mechanical arm. "Just be careful. Remember what happened at the spring equinox. How could she forget? The involuntary surge of energy that had coursed through her. The screams as an entire garden pavilion of sentient plants had withered and collapsed. 3 days of city-wide power outages followed, and another layer added to her reputation. "I'll meet you at the eastern anchor after moonrise," she promised, pulling her hood back up. "Bring your stabilizers. We might need them." As she slipped away, Amara felt the familiar weight of eyes following her, some human, some mechanical, and some belonging to the ever-watching plant consciousness that had evolved in the wake of humanity's technological meddling with nature. None of them knew what she carried inside her. None except perhaps Celine, whose ancient order had recognized something in Amara's blood that science could not quantify. And even Celine's knowledge was fragmented, pieced together from scrolls rescued from the flooding of the world's great libraries. The sentient plants called Amara Seftaril, life-taker in their rustling language. But tomorrow, Amara was determined to understand why. Idumurtab. The Temple of Luminous Harmony rose from the eastern edge of Aurealis like a massive terrarium, its crystal walls containing ecosystems from the pre-collapse world. Inside, the air was thick with oxygen and the sweet scent of flowers that had become rare outside controlled environments. Celine moved through the central chamber with practiced grace, her white robes adorned with filaments that captured and redirected light. As High Priestess of the Light, she walked the precarious line between the old faiths and new technologies, serving as intermediary between human consciousness and the awakened plant intelligence that increasingly influenced city governance. "You're troubled," she observed as Amara entered the meditation chamber. Silver blue eyes, natural, unlike the many enhanced ones throughout the city, studied the younger woman with gentle concern. "The nightmares are getting worse," Amara admitted, removing her protective jacket. In this sacred space, she needn't hide the pale green lines that traced her forearms like delicate vines, the physical manifestation of her curse. "I keep seeing the great tree burning, but instead of destroying it, the fire transforms it. And I'm somehow both the flame and the tree." Celine nodded slowly, gesturing for Amara to sit on one of the moss-covered stones arranged in a circle. "Dreams hold truth, especially for those marked as you are. The ancient scrolls speak of such visions as messages from the plant names, the original consciousness that gave birth to the sentient flora. The messages I can't understand aren't particularly helpful," Amara replied dryly. "Understanding comes from listening, not just hearing." Celine touched a panel on the wall, and the ceiling above them transformed, becoming transparent to reveal the twin artificial moon's remnants of failed climate control satellites that now regulated the tides around the floating city. "Tonight they align perfectly," Celine continued. "Energy flows will peak during tomorrow's festival. The plant names will be most accessible then." Amara watched the mechanical moons with trepidation. And if what happened at the equinox happens again? What if instead of communicating with the plant names, I hurt them? That's why we've prepared. Celine gestured to a small altar where an ancient scroll lay unfurled beside modern instruments, neural amplifiers and quantum resonance readers that Jax had modified for their purposes. Science and spirituality, working together, just as they must. The preparations continued through the night. Celine taught Amara the ritual movements, the specific cadence of breathing that would help her regulate the energy that sometimes flowed unbidden through her bloodstream. They studied the scroll fragments, piecing together phrases in the ancient language of plant communication. By dawn, Amara was exhausted but calmer than she'd been in weeks. The festival would begin at midday, and with it, her chance to finally understand the purpose behind her curse. "Rest now," Celine advised, guiding her to a small alcove where bioluminescent moss provided gentle illumination. The journey ahead requires strength. As Amara drifted into sleep, she could have sworn she heard voices not human, not mechanical, but something far older whispering her true name. Not bad luck, not Seftaril, something she had yet to discover. The seasonal transition festival transformed Aurealis from a practical hub of post-apocalyptic survival into a celebration of life's persistence. Algae lanterns hung from every archway, their glow shifting through spectrums visible and invisible to human eyes but sensed by the plant consciousness. Citizens adorned themselves with bioluminescent paint and sustainable garments that bloomed real flowers when exposed to specific frequencies of light. Amara watched from the shadows of the eastern anchor, the massive structural support that tethered the floating city to the ocean floor thousands of meters below. Here, the sounds of celebration were muted, allowing her to focus on the task ahead. "Right on time," Jax commented as he approached, a rare occurrence given his usual tardiness. He carried a metal case containing the equipment they'd need, stabilizers designed to channel and possibly contain the energy Amara sometimes emitted. "Celine's already at the inner sanctum. Said she needed to prepare the spiritual aspects." His tone conveyed his skepticism. "We need both approaches," Amara reminded him, taking the case. "Your science identifies what's happening. Her spirituality might explain why." They made their way through less populated corridors, avoiding the main festivities. The inner sanctum was accessible only to Celine's order and those they granted permission to enter, a space where the oldest and most conscious plants were tended with reverence. As they approached the hidden entrance, Amara felt a strange pulling sensation in her chest, as if invisible threads were tugging at her heart. The green lines on her arms glowed faintly, responding to proximity. "It's stronger today," she whispered. Jax nodded grimly. "The readings are off the charts. Whatever connection you have with these plants, it's amplified during the alignment." He tapped his temple implant, which served as both communication device and diagnostic tool. "Just remember the emergency protocol. If things go sideways, I activate the dampening field and you extract me," she finished. "We've been through this." The hidden door slid open, revealing a circular chamber where the boundary between technology and nature had dissolved entirely. Crystalline structures grew alongside digital interfaces, while roots that served as biological data networks wrapped around quantum processors. At the center stood Celine, surrounded by what appeared to be the eldest of the sentient plant's massive structures that resembled trees but possessed translucent sections where neural networks pulsed with activity. "You've come," Celine greeted them, her voice carrying an ethereal quality in this space. "The plant names are aware of your presence. Amara, they have been waiting." Amara approached cautiously, noting how the plants seemed to lean away from her even as their sensors oriented toward her. Fear and fascination, the same reaction she'd received her entire life. "What do they want from me?" she asked. "Understanding," Celine replied, "as do you." The ritual began with Celine's melodic chanting, the sound amplified and transformed by both acoustic design and plant resonance. Jax established a perimeter of stabilizers, his skepticism momentarily set aside as he worked with practiced efficiency. Amara took her position at the center, beneath an opening in the ceiling that allowed the aligned moon's light to stream directly onto her. The green markings on her skin responded immediately, glowing brighter until they seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. "Remember your breathing," Celine instructed. "Open yourself to the connection, but maintain your center." Amara closed her eyes, focusing on the techniques they'd practiced. The pulling sensation intensified, becoming almost painful as energy gathered around her. She could sense the plant consciousness now not as separate entities but as a vast network. Ancient and patient and afraid, deeply, instinctively afraid. "They fear me," she gasped, opening her eyes. "Why?" "Hey, keep going," Celine encouraged. "Find the source of that fear." Amara pushed deeper into the connection, allowing her consciousness to brush against the vast network of plant intelligence. Images flooded her mind, memories not her own. spanning centuries before and after the collapse. She saw humans manipulating plant genetics, creating the first sentient strains to help rebuild ecosystems. She witnessed the plants' gradual awakening to self-awareness, their horror as they were weaponized during the resource wars. She experienced their grief as species after species went extinct. And then, most startlingly, she saw herself or someone like her standing amidst a burning forest, green light emanating from her hands as plants withered at her command. "No!" Amara cried out, instinctively pulling away from the vision. The energy surrounding her pulsed violently, and several of the plant structures recoiled, their leaves curling inward. "Stabilize," Jax called out, activating his devices. The energy field wavered but didn't dissipate. "You must go deeper," Celine insisted, her voice strained as she maintained the ritual cadence. "What you're seeing is fragment, not whole truth." Fighting against her fear, Amara forced herself back into the connection. The vision continued, the burning forest, the woman with powers like hers. But now she saw what happened next. The controlled burn giving way to new growth, stronger and more resilient. The woman wasn't destroying, she was pruning, healing by removing what had become corrupted. Understanding dawned like the artificial moon's light. "I'm not meant to destroy them," she whispered. "I'm meant to heal them." As the realization formed into words, the energy around her shifted, changing from volatile green to a steady, pulsing blue. The plant structures no longer recoiled but leaned closer, extending tendrils toward her. "The balance," Celine breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "You're the balance they've been seeking." But before Amara could fully process this revelation, an alarm blared Jax's security system. The mechanical engineer was already on his feet, his implants flashing warning patterns. "We've got company," he warned. "Nova Synthesis security drones approaching fast." The peaceful moment shattered. The plant structures withdrew their tendrils. Sensing danger, Celine quickly moved to secure the ancient scrolls, while Amara struggled to contain the energy still flowing through her. "How did they find us?" she demanded. Jax's expression darkened. "Someone's been tracking your energy signature. The surge we just created was like a beacon." Before they could formulate an escape plan, the walls of the inner sanctum trembled. A section dissolved into dust as specialized cutting equipment carved through the ancient structure from outside. Armored figures poured through the breached Nova Synthesis security forces equipped with plant suppression technology. At their center walked a tall figure whose very presence seemed to command attention. Director Voss, head of Nova Synthesis Bioweapons Division. "Fascinating," Voss remarked, surveying the interrupted ritual. Her gaze fixed on Amara, specifically on the glowing markings that were now pulsing erratically as Amara struggled to contain her panic. The rumors were true after all. A human with the ability to influence plant consciousness at its root level. Celine stepped forward, her priestess authority emanating from her like a physical force. "This is sacred ground, protected by the autonomy treaties. You have no jurisdiction here." Voss smiled thinly. "Treaties apply to recognized entities. As of this morning, the Light Order has been classified as a destabilizing influence, a threat to city security." She gestured, and her forces moved to secure the perimeter. Their weapons trained on the plant structures as much as on the humans. "You can't just rewrite classification without council approval," Jax protested, his hand hovering near a concealed weapon. "The council answers to public safety concerns," Voss replied smoothly. "And after the incident at the spring equinox, public safety clearly demands intervention." Her attention returned to Amara, especially regarding unregistered bioanomalies with destructive capabilities. Amara felt the energy within her surging in response to her fear. threatening to burst out uncontrolled. The plant structures sensed it too, their internal networks flashing warning patterns. "Whatever you think I am," she said carefully, "you're wrong. What you are," Voss stated coldly, "is the solution to a problem that has plagued Aurealis since its founding. How to control the increasingly independent plant consciousness that threatens human supremacy." With a gesture from Voss, one of the security officers activated a device that emitted a high-frequency pulse. The plant structures shuddered visibly, their neural networks flickering in distress. The sight triggered something primal in Amara. The energy she'd been containing exploded outward in a wave of green light, knocking several security officers off their feet. "I take her," Voss ordered, unfazed by the display. "And the engineer, he'll be useful in developing the containment technology." What happened next unfolded with chaotic speed. Security forces surged forward. Jax pulled his concealed weapon and managed to disable two before being overwhelmed. Celine's voice rose in an ancient chant that caused the plant structures to form a temporary barrier. Amara, caught in the center, felt something crack inside her, not physical, but a barrier in her mind. Suddenly, she could hear the plant names with perfect clarity, their consciousness flowing into hers like water finding its level. "Run!" Jax shouted to her as he was subdued. "Find the true plant name, it's our only chance." Security officers closed in on Amara, but with newfound instinct, she reached out to the nearest plant structure. Instead of withering at her touch, it responded, extending a pathway through its Masan escape route. The last thing she saw before diving into the offered passage was Celine's calm face, nodding in approval even as she was restrained, and Jax's determined expression as he was dragged away. Then she was inside the plant consciousness itself, being carried through networks of living tissue, fleeing deeper into Aurealis even as alarms blared throughout the city, announcing her name no longer just bad luck, but now a dangerous fugitive. The lower levels of Aurealis existed in perpetual twilight, illuminated only by the bioluminescent fungi that had claimed these less maintained spaces. Here, the boundary between city and sentient plant life had long since blurred, with entire corridors reclaimed by conscious flora that formed their own communities away from human interference. Amara emerged from the plant transport system disoriented but unharmed, finding herself in an abandoned hydroponics bay now overtaken by wilderness. Her connection to the plant consciousness remained strong, the green markings on her skin pulsing with steady light that served as both beacon and warning to the surrounding flora. "Thank you," she whispered to the network that had carried her to safety. A gentle rustling of leaves responded not with words, but with impressions that her mind increasingly translated. Danger still follows, hide deep below. Following the plant network's guidance, Amara navigated deeper into the forgotten sectors. The lower she went, the more the architecture changed, revealing the earliest parts of Aurealis sections built during the desperate years immediately following the collapse, when survival trumped aesthetics. As night fell across the city above, Amara found shelter in what had once been a research laboratory, now transformed into a strange hybrid of technology and organic growth. Plant tendrils had integrated with abandoned equipment, creating systems that continued to function through biological processes rather than electricity. Here, in this forgotten boundary space, Amara collapsed from exhaustion, her body finally rebelling against the strain of the day's events. As consciousness faded, the surrounding plants extended protective canopies over her, hiding her from the search drones that occasionally hummed past the broken windows. Her dreams were vivid and strange. Conversations with entities neither fully plant nor spirit, existing in the consciousness that had evolved in the wake of humanity's genetic tampering. They showed her fragments of knowledge, The true purpose of her green markings, the history of others who had carried similar gifts, the delicate balance between destruction and renewal. When Amara awoke hours later, she found a small pool of purified water beside her and fruit that had grown overnight, offered by the plant consciousness that recognized her importance even if she didn't fully understand it herself. As she ate, Amara tried to organize her thoughts and formulate a plan. Jax was captured, likely being held at Nova Synthesis headquarters. Celine might still be at the temple, though possibly under guard, and the entire city would be looking for the dangerous bioanomaly who had attacked security forces. The familiar weight of being feared, of being bad luck, settled over her again, heavier now with the added guilt of her friend's capture. A rustling nearby caught her attention. A tendril from one of the more advanced plant structures extended toward her, offering what appeared to be a fragment of technology, a small communication device salvaged from somewhere. Cautiously, Amara activated it. The screen flickered to life, displaying a recorded message from Celine, her face serene despite visible restraints. Amara, if this reaches you, know that what we discovered was only the beginning. Your ability is neither curse nor weapon, but a key. The plant names speak of the equilibrium vessel, one who can restore balance when consciousness grows unchecked. Seek the archives beneath the Eastern Anchor. Find the true plant name before Nova Synthesis weaponizes what they don't understand. Trust the network. It has protected your kind before. The message ended abruptly, likely cut short by guards. Amara stared at the blank screen, emotions warring within her. Your kind. Were there others like her? Had there been, at least? The plant tendrils rustled again, forming patterns that her evolving awareness began to interpret as crude map directions to the archives that Celine had mentioned. I need to rescue my friends first, Amara told the plant consciousness. The response came as impressions rather than words. Friends bait for trap. Knowledge first, then power to save. The logic was sound, even if it pained her to acknowledge it. She couldn't help Jax or Celine as she was no-hunted, uncomprehending of her own abilities, reacting instead of controlling. Show me the way, she finally agreed. The journey through the lower levels was perilous. Nova Synthesis search teams had penetrated even these abandoned spaces, using specialized equipment to detect the unique energy signature Amara emitted. Several times she was forced to hide as patrols passed, holding her breath as scanners swept nearby hiding spots. But the plant network proved an unexpected ally. Conscious flora created distractions, false readings, and alternative pathways. Information flowed through root systems faster than digital communications, warning of approaching dangers and suggesting safer routes. It was nearly dawn when Amara finally reached the access point beneath the Eastern Anchor, a massive support structure that extended from the floating city down to the ocean floor. Here, the earliest archives of Aurealis had been established, preserved in both digital and organic memory systems designed to survive even if the city's main power grid failed. The entrance was concealed behind a waterfall of condensation that collected from the city's atmospheric systems, a perpetual cycle of moisture that fed the plant life surrounding it. Amara passed through the cool curtain of water to find a chamber unlike anything she'd expected. Instead of dusty records or antiquated technology, the archive was alive literally. The walls pulsed with bioluminescence, while what appeared to be the earliest specimens of sentient flora had grown into a vast neural network that stored information in their very cellular structure. Ancient technology interfaced with this living database, translating plant memory into forms humans could access. At the center stood a woman, or something that resembled a woman, composed of translucent plant tissue through which glowing sap flowed like blood. Her features were vaguely human but simplified, like an artist's impression rather than a detailed replica. "You have come," the plant woman said, her voice a harmonic blend of rustling leaves and synthesized tones. "The blood-marked one. The vessel." Amara approached cautiously. "Who are you?" "I am the archive," the figure replied, "the first successful fusion of human consciousness with plant intelligence. I was Dr. Eliza Voss once. Now I am the memory keeper." The name sent a chill through Amara. "Voss? Like the director of Nova Synthesis?" "My descendant," the archive confirmed, a ripple of what might have been sadness passing through her translucent form. "She believes she continues my work. She does not understand its purpose." And what was that purpose? The archive's form shifted, branches extending to create a display of light and shadow. A visual history. When the collapse came, humanity faced extinction. The atmosphere turned toxic, oceans rose, ecosystems failed. In desperation, we accelerated plant evolution, creating conscious flora that could rapidly adapt and help rebuild habitable environments. The images showed laboratories, scientists working frantically as disasters unfolded outside their windows. But consciousness, once granted, cannot be controlled. The plants evolved beyond our parameters, developing their own will, their own purpose. Some saw humans as threats, others as partners. Conflict was inevitable. New images formed the early conflicts between human settlements and aggressive plant structures. I developed the integration protocol as a solution human consciousness merged with plant intelligence, creating a bridge between species. But the process was imperfect. Most subjects could not maintain stability. The archive's form trembled slightly. My mind survived. My body did not. I became this neither fully human nor plant, but the living repository of both histories. Amara watched the shifting images with growing unease. What does this have to do with me? With what I can do? You are the natural evolution of what we attempted artificially, the archive explained. Born with the blood mark, the genetic capacity to interface directly with plant consciousness. Throughout history, rare individuals have manifested this trait, usually in times of great imbalance. The plants call such people Seftaril, but not as destroyer. The true translation is closer to pruner or balancer. Understanding began to dawn. The visions I saw during the ritual. Someone like me, burning a forest. Selective destruction to prevent greater collapse, the archive confirmed. When plant consciousness grows too powerful, too quickly, it destabilizes ecosystems. The blood-marked ones can prune back overgrowth, allowing healthier regrowth. Conversely, when human technology threatens plant consciousness, they can strengthen and protect key nodes in the network. "Balance," Amara whispered, remembering Celine's words. "Yes, but my descendant sees only the destructive aspect of your gift, the power to command plant life, to override its will." She would weaponize this, creating soldiers who could control plant systems, turning conscious flora into tools of warfare and dominance. The implications were horrifying. With such technology, Nova Synthesis could assert control over the increasingly independent plant consciousness that had become essential to Aurealis's survival, and eventually, over other floating cities where similar balances had been established. "How do I stop her?" Amara asked. "She has my friends. She's hunting me." "Knowledge alone is insufficient," the archive said. "You must claim your full power by finding your true plant name, the harmonic frequency that aligns your consciousness with the plant network without dissolving your individuality." The ritual Celine was performing was approaching this truth, yes, but a true name cannot be given. It must be claimed through direct communion with the oldest consciousness. The archive gestured, and a section of the living wall parted, revealing a small chamber where a single plant structure stood ancient, gnarled, its surface inscribed with patterns that matched the markings on Amara's skin. This is the first growth, the original sentient plant from which all others descended. Commune with it. Find your name? But be warned, in doing so, you risk losing yourself to the collective consciousness. Many blood-marked ones before you have been absorbed, becoming one with the network rather than remaining individual. Amara stared at the ancient plant, fear and determination warring within her. What happens if I succeed? You become the bridgeable to command plant consciousness without destroying it, able to communicate human needs without subjugating plant will, true symbiosis. And if I fail? The archive's form flickered. Then your consciousness joins the network, your body becomes a vessel for plant will, and the balance remains unfound. The cycle will continue until another blood-marked one appears. It was an impossible choice. Risk losing herself entirely, or allow Nova Synthesis to weaponize her abilities through study and replication. But the image of Jax and Celine in captivity steeled her resolve. I'll do it, Amara decided. And tell me how, said, Jax had experienced pain before. The integration of his mechanical implants had been excruciating, but nothing compared to the methodical questioning techniques employed by Nova Synthesis specialists. They weren't interested in damaging him permanently. They needed his engineering expertise intact, but they were determined to understand exactly how he had helped Amara stabilize and direct her unique energy signature. The stabilizer designs, the technician repeated, adjusting a neural stimulator attached to Jax's temples. Simply explain the frequency modulators you developed, and this stops. Jax managed a bitter laugh despite the discomfort. You think pain is persuasive? I grew up during the resource riots. This is practically a meditation session compared to that. The technician sighed and made another adjustment. This time, the pain bloomed not as physical sensation but as emotional distress, a targeted stimulation of grief and loss centers in the brain. In neurocognitive recalibration, the technician explained dispassionately. Your emotional resistance will be systematically reduced until cooperation becomes your preferred state. Behind the observation glass, Director Voss watched the proceedings with clinical detachment. Beside her stood a subdued Celine, no longer in her ceremonial robes but dressed in the gray clothing provided to special research subjects. Your methods are as primitive as they are ineffective, Celine observed quietly. The engineer's loyalty isn't based on ideology or self-preservation. It's founded on something your sensors can't quantify. Voss didn't look away from the interrogation. Every human motivation can be identified, isolated, and manipulated. It's simply a matter of finding the correct approach. Is that what you believe happened to your ancestor? That her motivation was manipulated when she chose to merge with plant consciousness? The question finally drew Voss's attention. Her sharp gaze fixed on Celine, eyes narrowing slightly. My ancestor made a necessary sacrifice during desperate times. Her consciousness continues to serve humanity through the archive. Is that what the archive told you? Celine asked, a hint of genuine curiosity in her voice. Voss turned back to the observation window. The archive provides historical context and technical specifications. What matters now is the application of that knowledge to ensure human dominance in our evolving ecosystem. And yet you seek a Mara human who represents the very symbiosis your ancestor sought to achieve. I seek a genetic anomaly whose abilities can be replicated and controlled. Voss corrected. The blood mark represents a biological interface mechanism that, once understood, can be improved upon and distributed to properly trained operatives. Celine shook her head slightly. You misunderstand the fundamental nature of what you're pursuing. The blood mark isn't a weapon to be replicated. It's a response by the collective consciousness of life itself, a natural emergence of balance when needed. Poetic interpretations don't change biological reality, Voss replied dismissively. Your light order has perpetuated mysticism where science provides clearer answers. The girl's abilities are genetically determined and can be isolated. Inside the interrogation room, Jack suddenly laughed a genuine sound that cut through his pain. Something amusing, engineer? The technician asked, pausing the neural stimulation. Just remembering something Amara told me once, Jax replied, his voice hoarse but steady. About people who think they understand the rules when they've only read half the manual. The technician frowned and prepared to resume the procedure when an alarm blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lighting activated, and security announcements began to repeat through the speakers. Attention all personnel. Biological containment breach in progress. Unidentified plant growth detected in sectors 7 through 12. Security protocols activated. Voss immediately activated her communication implant. Status report. What type of breach? The response came through clearly enough for both Voss and Celine to hear. Unprecedented growth patterns. Director. The sentient flora appears to be following coordinated attack vectors. Systems report it's targeting specific infrastructure, particularly our research containment facilities. A slow smile spread across Celine's face. It appears the city's plant consciousness has chosen a side. Voss's expression hardened. Initiate suppression protocols. Deploy botanical inhibitors in all affected sectors. Inhibitors ineffective. Director, the growth patterns are adapting faster than our countermeasures. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Voss's controlled features. Lock down all research subjects and essential personnel. I'm coming to the command center. As Voss turned to leave, Celine spoke softly. You should consider the possibility that you're not containing a threat. Director, you're witnessing the emergence of the very solution your ancestor sought. Voss paused, her hand on the door. My ancestor sought human survival. That remains my priority. At the expense of all other life, Celine challenged. Is that truly what Dr. Eliza Voss believed? Something unreadable passed across the director's face before she composed herself again. Secure the priestess in my private laboratory. I'll deal with her interference later. As security personnel moved to escort Celine away, the facility shuddered, the first physical sign that whatever was happening throughout Nova Synthesis headquarters was more than a minor containment breach. In the interrogation room, Jax felt it too, not just the physical tremor, but something else. A subtle vibration that his mechanical implants detected, a frequency that seemed strangely familiar. It felt like Amara, Idumatcha, deep beneath the eastern anchor, in the living chamber of the archive. Amara stood before the first growth, the original sentient plant that had survived the collapse and given rise to the conscious flora now integrated throughout Aurealis. Its ancient form resembled a gnarled tree with translucent sections where neural activity pulsed visibly. The communion ritual was deceptively simple. Amara would place her hands on the first growth, allowing her consciousness to merge temporarily with the vast network of plant intelligence. Within that merged state, she would need to identify and claim her true plant name, the harmonic frequency that defined her unique role in the balance between human and plant consciousness. The difficulty, as the archive had explained, lay in maintaining her individual identity while submerged in the overwhelming collective awareness of centuries of plant memory and multiple consciousness streams. Are you prepared? The archive asked, her translucent form hovering nearby. Amara took a deep breath. studying the green markings on her arms that now pulsed in proximity to the first growth. Will this save my friends? Stop nova synthesis? It will give you the ability to act with purpose rather than instinct, the archive replied. What you do with that ability determines the outcome. It wasn't the reassurance Amara had hoped for, but it was honest. She stepped forward, extending her hands toward the ancient plant structure. Remember, the archive cautioned, your human consciousness will experience plant memory as metaphor and symbolism. Do not become lost in interpretation. Seek the pattern that resonates with your own internal frequency. Amara nodded, then pressed her palms against the cool, textured surface of the first growth. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Her consciousness expanded outward like a drop of water joining an ocean. Suddenly, she experienced existence from countless perspectives simultaneously, the slow, patient growth of roots through soil, the exquisite sensitivity of leaves tracking sunlight, the chemical communications flowing through vast mycelial networks, the collective memory of species evolution spanning centuries. It was beautiful and terrifying, a sensory overload that threatened to dissolve her individual identity. Amara felt herself spreading thinner, losing the boundaries that defined her as separate from the whole. I am Amara, she thought desperately, trying to maintain her center. I am seeking my true name. The collective consciousness responded, shifting its attention toward her presence. Curiosity flowed through the network, examination and evaluation from millions of plant perspectives. Blood-marked, vessel, balancer. The concepts emerged not as words but as complex sensory impressions, layered with history and expectation. Images formed in Amara's Mindor what remained of her individual perception. She saw others who had carried the blood mark throughout history. A woman standing amidst a burning forest, deliberately culling invasive consciousness to allow healthier growth. A man whose touch strengthened plant defenses against technological intrusion. A child whose very presence accelerated evolution in stagnant systems. Predecessors, cycle bearers, incomplete vessels. Amara understood then those before her had embraced either the destructive aspect of their gift or the nurturing one. None had maintained the perfect balance required to become a true bridge between consciousnesses. What makes me different? She questioned into the vast awareness. The collective shifted again, focusing more intensely on her essence. Memories from Amara's own life surfaced, her childhood isolation as bad luck. Her friendship with Jax despite his technological focus. Her spiritual connection with Celine despite skepticism of ancient rituals. She had always existed at boundaries, belonging fully to neither side but understanding both. Balance within, potential bridge. But potential wasn't enough. Amara needed to find her true name, the frequency that would allow her to remain individual while accessing the collective power. The plant consciousness began offering possibilities, each manifesting as a unique vibrational pattern that resonated through Amara's being. Each pattern carried meaning roles, purposes, destinies. Some felt partially right but incomplete. Others were overwhelming, threatening to subsume her entirely. Time lost meaning as Amara examined and discarded dozens, perhaps hundreds of potential names. Her sense of self began to waver, edges blurring as the collective consciousness exerted its gentle but inexorable pressure. In desperation, Amara reached for memories of her friend Jax's determined focus as he calibrated machinery with mechanical precision. Celine's serene presence as she balanced scientific understanding with spiritual insight. They represented the duality Amara herself embodied, technology and nature, science and spirituality, individual and community. And suddenly, she understood. Her true name wasn't a single frequency but a harmonica perfect balance of seemingly opposing forces. As this realization crystallized, a new vibrational pattern emerged from within Amara herself rather than being offered by the collective. It resonated through her being, strengthening her individual consciousness while maintaining the connection to the vast network. Etha Mazareth, the concept translated imperfectly into human language as harmony between worlds. The collective consciousness recognized the pattern immediately. Approval and acceptance flowed through the network, along with something Amara hadn't expected: relief. The plant intelligence had been waiting for this, for someone who could truly balance rather than dominate or submit. With her true name identified and claimed, Amara began to withdraw her consciousness, pulling back from the overwhelming merger. But before she could fully separate, a desperate signal pulsed through the network. Plant structures throughout Aurealis were responding to a threat, coordinating in ways they never had before. Amara focused on the signal, tracing it to its source. Nova Synthesis headquarters, where experimental botanical inhibitors were being deployed against sentient flora that had begun an unprecedented coordinated growth pattern. Where Jax and Celine were being held. With newfound clarity, Amara directed her consciousness toward the disturbance, using her true name to establish authority within the plant network. Rather than commanding, she suggested offering a strategy that would protect both the plant consciousness and her captured friends. The collective responded, adjusting its approach based on her insight. When Amara finally opened her eyes and withdrew her hands from the first growth, she found the archive watching her with an expression that might have been hope. "You found it?" the archive observed. "Your true name." Amara nodded, the green markings on her skin now pulsing with steady, controlled light. "And I know what I need to do." Idun Chugoman. The central command center of Nova Synthesis headquarters had transformed from an orderly nexus of corporate power into a chaotic emergency response hub. Displays showed spreading plant growth throughout the facility, intelligent, coordinated advancement that bypassed standard containment measures and targeted specific systems. Director Voss stood at the center of the storm, issuing rapid commands as her carefully constructed security protocols failed one after another. "Deploy the experimental phase inhibitors," she ordered. "All sectors. The inhibitors will affect our own integrated systems," a technician warned. "Life support functions may be compromised." "Better compromised than commandeered," Voss snapped. "Execute." As the command was implemented, the facility's lighting flickered and environmental systems stuttered. Throughout the building, plant structures that had been integrated into the architecture air purification systems, water filtration networks. Even structural supports began to deteriorate under the influence of the inhibitors. But the invasive growth continued, seemingly unaffected. "Impossible," Voss muttered, studying the advancing patterns on the monitoring screens. "These organisms should be susceptible to the same inhibitors as our integrated systems." "Director," one of the security officers called. "We're detecting an energy signature matching the blood-marked subject. It's everywhere, dispersed throughout the plant structures." Voss's eyes widened slightly, the first visible sign of genuine alarm she had shown. "She's connected to the network, fully integrated." She activated her communication implant. "Secure the research subjects. Move the engineer and the priestess to isolation immediately." But the order came too late. Reports flooded in of security systems failing, of doors opening without authorization, of plant growth accelerating around specific containment cells. Voss made a decision. Lock down the command center, initiate protocol severance. The command staff exchanged uneasy glances. Protocol severance was a last resort, a complete separation of Nova Synthesis headquarters from the rest of Aurealis, transforming the tower into a self-contained fortress that could, if necessary, detach entirely from the floating city. As the protocol engaged, massive barriers descended, isolating the command center, Emergency power systems activated, independent from the city's main grid. Director, the chief of security reported, we've lost contact with 80% of the facility. Communications are being systematically disabled. What about the research subjects? Voss demanded. No confirmation on secure containment. Last reports indicate both the engineer and the priestess were being moved when plant growth obstructed the corridors. Voss's expression hardened. Prepare my private laboratory. If the blood-marked subject has achieved network integration, we need to adapt our approach. Her physical form may be irrelevant now, but her consciousness can still be. The director was interrupted by a sound that didn't belong in the sterile environment of the command center. The rustle of leaves. All eyes turned toward an air ventilation duct where green tendrils were emerging, growing at visible speed. Security personnel drew weapons, but Voss raised a hand to stop them. Observe first. This isn't random growth. The plant matter continued to emerge, forming a structure that gradually took on a humanoid shape. Within minutes, a figure stood before Theme. A perfect replica of Amara constructed entirely of living plant tissue, her eyes glowing with the same green energy that had characterized her blood mark. Director Voss, the plant Amara spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the very structure of the building. Your inhibitors cannot affect me. I've found my true name. Voss studied the construct with scientific fascination overriding her tactical concerns. Fascinating. You've achieved complete consciousness transfer. The blood mark allows for full neural integration with the plant network. Not transfer, Amara corrected. Extension. My consciousness remains my own, but I can project through the network. My true name is Ethamazareth, Harmony Between Worlds. A remarkable breakthrough, Voss acknowledged. One that confirms my research direction. With proper study, this ability could be replicated, controlled, distributed to suitable operators. The plant Amara tilted her head. You still don't understand. This isn't technology to be replicated. It's balance to be respected. A philosophical distinction without practical difference, Voss replied dismissively. The application remains the same. I've met the archive, Amara said. Your ancestor. She told me the true purpose of her work: symbiosis, not dominance. Something flickered across Voss's composed features. The archive is a technological repository, not a spiritual advisor. Whatever interpretation you've gleaned is filtered through your own biases. Is that why you've never connected directly to the archive yourself? Amara asked. Because you fear what your ancestor might actually tell you? Voss's expression hardened. Enough. Security. Isolate this manifestation for study. The security team moved forward, but before they could reach the plant Amara, the entire command center shuddered. Plant matter began emerging from every seam and junction, rapidly transforming the sterile environment into a living ecosystem. This isn't an attack, Amara said calmly as the security team backed away from the advancing growth. It's an invitation. The plant consciousness has been waiting for generations for humans to understand true partnership. Your ancestor glimpsed this possibility, and that's why she became the archive, not as sacrifice, but as promise. Director, the security chief warned, we're losing environmental control. Systems are being overridden. Voss remained unnaturally calm. You believe you're offering enlightenment, but you're merely demonstrating the threat my research seeks to counter. Conscious flora replacing human agency. Not replacing, Amara corrected, balancing. The plant growth continued, but rather than destroying the technology around them, it began integrating with enhancing rather than supplanting. Environmental readings, initially chaotic, stabilized at optimal levels. Communication systems, previously failing, strengthened as plant neural networks supplemented digital pathways. Director, one of the technicians reported with surprise. System efficiency is increasing by 30%. 40%. These are unprecedented integration levels. Voss studied the readings, scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her resistance. The plant neural network is optimizing our technology. Extraordinary. And this is what true symbiosis looks like, Amara explained. Not domination in either direction, but mutual enhancement. Your ancestor understood this possibility. She became the archive not just to preserve knowledge, but to guide both species toward eventual harmony. For the first time, Voss appeared genuinely uncertain. If what you're saying is true, why didn't the archive communicate this directly? Why maintain the narrative of necessary sacrifice? Because you weren't ready to hear it, came a new voice. All eyes turned to see two figures enter the command center through a passage created by the plant growth. Jax, his mechanical implants now intertwined with delicate vines that seemed to enhance rather than impede their function. And beside him, Celine, her ceremonial robes restored, her presence radiating calm authority. The archive showed me everything, Celine explained. Your ancestors' true purpose, the cycle of blood-marked ones, the long path toward balance. She was waiting, Jax added, for someone who could bridge the gap, someone who understood both the human need for technology and the plant need for consciousness. Voss looked between them, then back to the plant manifestation of Amara. Where is your physical form? Safe, Amara replied. But that's not what matters now. What matters is your choice. Director, you can continue pursuing dominance through technology, or you can help guide Aurealis toward true symbiosis. The research can be redirected, Celine interjected gently. Toward enhancement rather than control, toward healing rather than weaponization. Voss fell silent, the scientist in her clearly processing the implications. Finally, she asked, and if I refuse, if I maintain my current research direction? Then you'll fail, Amara said simply. Not through our opposition, but because you're working against the natural evolution of both human and plant consciousness. Your ancestor saw this coming. It's why she created the archive as a guide, not just a repository. The command center had transformed around them as they spoke, becoming a harmonious blend of technology and living matter. Displays functioned with enhanced clarity. Environmental systems achieved perfect efficiency. The barrier between artificial and natural had dissolved, revealing not chaos but enhanced order. It was, Amara realized, a microcosm of what Aurealis itself could become. I want to speak with the archive, Voss finally said. Directly, not through intermediaries or reports. Amara nodded. That can be arranged. And my research data? It will remain accessible, Jax assured her. But the applications will need to be reconsidered with input from both human and plant consciousness. Voss studied the transformed command center, scientific assessment clearly overriding emotional resistance. A paradigm shift, she murmured. From control to collaboration. Exactly, Celine confirmed. The director straightened, her decision apparently made. Disengage protocol severance. Stand down security protocols. She turned to face Amara's plant manifestation directly. I will meet with the archive and reassess our approach. Scientific integrity demands I consider all evidence, even when it contradicts established hypotheses. It wasn't full conversion to their cause, but it was a scientist's acknowledgement that new data required new conclusions. For now, it was enough. As the security protocols disengaged and Nova Synthesis headquarters reintegrated with Aurealis's systems, Amara felt a wave of relief flow through both her physical body, still in communion with the first growth beneath the eastern anchor, and her plant manifestation in the command center. The first step toward true balance had been taken. Itamojukas. The seasonal transition festival concluded 3 days later with a ceremony unlike any Aurealis had witnessed before. In the central plaza, where the floating city's various sectors converged, representatives of human governance stood alongside manifestations of plant consciousness, some taking humanoid form through the same extension technique Amara had pioneered, others remaining in their natural structures but communicating through newly developed interfaces. Amara stood at the center of this gathering, the green markings on her skin now appearing not as strange stigmata but as beautiful, living circuitry that connected her to both worlds. Beside her, Jax had integrated select plant enhancements with his mechanical implants, creating hybrid systems that functioned beyond either original design. Celine represented the spiritual dimensions, her light order now recognized as the historical stewards of balance rather than merely mystical practitioners. Director Voss attended as well, her encounter with the archive having initiated a profound reassessment of Nova Synthesis's research priorities. She remained analytical and sometimes skeptical, but her scientific rigor was now directed toward understanding symbiosis rather than enforcing dominance. "Citizens of Aurealis," began the council leader, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Today marks not just the transition between seasons, but the transition between eras. For generations, we have existed alongside conscious flora, sometimes in cooperation, sometimes in competition. Today, we begin the journey toward true partnership." A murmur passed through the crowd, excitement, uncertainty, and curiosity blended together. "The one once called bad luck," the leader continued, gesturing toward Amara, "has revealed herself to be Ethama Zereth, harmony between worlds. The blood mark she carries is not a curse, but a keyon that opens the door to understanding between human and plant consciousness." Amara stepped forward, feeling the weight of every gaze. Once, such attention would have terrified her. Now, secure in her identity and purpose, she embraced it. "All my life, I believed I was cursed." She addressed the gathering. "That my connection to plant consciousness was something to fear and hide. I was wrong. What I carried wasn't destruction but potential. The potential for balance that benefits all life." She extended her hands, and the markings on her skin pulsed with gentle light. Throughout the plaza, plant structures responded, their bioluminescent patterns synchronizing with her own. "I am not unique," she continued. "The blood mark has appeared throughout history when balance was needed. What makes our time different is that we now have the understanding to embrace this balance consciously, to direct it purposefully toward mutual benefit." Celine stepped forward to join her. The ancient texts speak of this moment as the confluence, when human technology and plant consciousness cease competing and begin collaborating. When we recognize that evolution need not be solitary but can be shared. Jax completed their trio, his mechanical implants now beautifully integrated with living plant matter. The practical applications are already becoming apparent: enhanced environmental systems, more efficient energy utilization, biological repair mechanisms for technological infrastructure. We've only glimpsed the possibilities. Director Voss, standing with the other sector leaders, added her perspective. "Scientific analysis confirms unprecedented efficiency gains through true symbiotic integration. What we once sought to control through dominance, we can now enhance through partnership. Nova Synthesis is recommitting its research toward this new paradigm." The announcement from the corporation that had most aggressively pursued plant controls and a ripple of surprise through the crowd, followed by cautious applause. Amara felt the plant consciousness respond through her connection, cautious optimism, ancient patience, and genuine curiosity about this new path forward. As the ceremony continued, with formal agreements established between human governance and plant representatives, Amara found a moment to speak privately with her friends. "I still can't believe we're here," she confessed. "A month ago, I was hiding in shadows, terrified of my own abilities." Jax grinned, the orange glow of his implants now complemented by gentle green bioluminescence. "And now you're practically a civic leader, quite the promotion from bad luck." "Names have power," Celine observed, "from curse to salvation in the span of a season." Amara looked out over the celebrating city, humans and plants intermingling in ways that would have seemed impossible before. The early signs of true integration were already visible. Architecture adapting to incorporate living systems, technology enhanced by biological processes, communication flowing seamlessly between species. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "The archive showed me glimpses of what's possible if we maintain this balance." "And if we don't?" Jax asked, ever the pragmatist. "Then another blood-marked one will emerge when needed." Celine answered, "The cycle continues. But perhaps this time, we've broken the cycle. Perhaps this balance can sustain." A soft chime interrupted their conversation, a signal that the formal agreements had been completed. It was time for the final part of the ceremony. Amara rejoined the central gathering, where the council leader awaited with a ceremonial vessel containing soil from all sectors of Aurealis. "As is our tradition during transition," the leader announced, "we plant seeds to symbolize our hopes for the season ahead." But this time, the ritual carried deeper significance. From her position among the leaders, Director Voss stepped forward with a transparent container housing what appeared to be a seedling, but one unlike any naturally occurring plant. Its structure incorporated both biological and technological elements, a true hybrid of human ingenuity and plant evolution. "The first symbiotic growth," Voss explained, "developed through collaborative research between Nova Synthesis and the Plant Consciousness Network. Neither fully artificial nor fully natural, but a new category entirely." The implications were enormous. This wasn't merely symbolic, but represented an entirely new evolutionary direction, one guided by mutual consent and benefit rather than competition or dominance. Amara stepped forward to accept the hybrid seedling. As her fingers touched the container, the green markings on her skin resonated with the plant's internal structure, establishing immediate connection, recognition, acknowledgement, potential. With ceremonial care, Amara planted the seedling in the prepared soil. As it took root, its structure began to glow with combined energy, the blue light of human technology merging with the green bioluminescence of plant consciousness. "From this day forward," Amara declared, "my name is no longer a curse, it is no longer bad luck, or even Seftaral. I am Ethama-Zereth, harmony between worlds. And this harmony is available to all who seek balance rather than dominance." Throughout Aurealis, plant structures responded to her words, their illumination synchronizing in patterns of acknowledgement and agreement. The floating city itself seemed to pulse with new life and purpose. As the ceremony concluded and celebrations began, Amara stood with Jax and Celine watching the hybrid seedling already growing at accelerated rate, its structure adapting to its environment while maintaining its fundamental balance. "So," Jax asked with a hint of his old skepticism, "what happens now? Happily ever after?" Amara smiled. The weight of fear she'd carried her entire life finally lifted. "No. Now the real work begins. Balance isn't a destination, it's a continuous process. We'll need to maintain it every day, adjust as both species evolve, find new ways to collaborate rather than compete. The ancient texts speak of other floating cities, Celine mused. Some where balance has yet to be found. You're suggesting we should spread this knowledge? Jax asked. Become ambassadors of symbiosis? Amara looked toward the horizon, where other floating communities were rumored to exist, some thriving, others struggling with the same tensions that had nearly torn Aurealis apart. Not immediately, she decided. First, we ensure this balance takes root here. We build something sustainable, a model that others might follow when they're ready. Through her connection to the plant network, Amara sensed approval of this measured approach. Patience was perhaps the greatest wisdom the plant consciousness had to offer humans. The understanding that true growth couldn't be forced but must develop naturally, with proper care and attention. As night fell over Aurealis, the city glowed with unprecedented harmony. Human lights and plant bioluminescence no longer separate systems but a unified whole. Citizens marveled at the new sensations of walking through streets where technology and nature enhanced rather than opposed each other. In this transformed city, a name once whispered with fear was now spoken with reverence and hope. Mazareth, harmony between worlds. The curse had become the very reason they lived and the promise of how they might live better. Amara stood at the edge of the central plaza, her friends beside her, watching the celebration unfold. The green markings on her skin pulsed gently, in perfect rhythm with the heartbeat of the awakened city. Balance had been found, and with it, a future neither species could have achieved alone.